How's it? Welcome inside the coach's office. We've got a great episode for you today. Head coach of Greeneville boys basketball, Brad Woolsey, is on the show. Also, the voice of the Green Devils and the voice of the Tusculum University Pioneers, Radio Greeneville sports director Brian Stayton also joins us inside the coach's office. All that and more coming up.
And it starts now.
The following is a special presentation of the coach's office.
I never punt on Madden. Go Noles. I don't even know what roll tide means.
I mean, let them in. What is there to lose?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, all right. Glad to have you in here. Why was everyone so concerned with the outfield play for the movie to be called Angels in the Outfield?
Where'd you get your shirt? Foot Locker? Uh-oh, Murphy's calling.
And now your hosts, Kyle Donahue and Matt Ripley.
And welcome back inside the coach's office. With us today is Greeneville coach Brad Woolsey. Coach, how's it going today?
Good, Kyle. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Great. Trying to stay away from the corona.
Enjoying this time away.
Yeah. If we had something to watch on TV, it'd be great.
It's crazy, isn't it?
I'm down to watching the Tiger King on Netflix. If you haven't checked it out, go ahead and check.
We watched about every Marvel movie in the last week and a half. We just killed the Marvel movies ourselves.
That's awesome. Well, your team's currently awaiting the state tournament. You fortunate enough to make the state tournament. You kind of limbo. But before we talk about all that, just kind of talk about how everything started to happen within, that week and a half. What all went on with you guys during that week or week and a half?
It starts out pretty good. Played that Monday night and played well against Fulton, and a lot of celebration and stuff. And we took Tuesday off, and then on Wednesday we came back and practiced. Of course, we had a couple guys that got injured. We had Trey Mays get injured with the ankle, and Jaden Manuel broke his nose in the Fulton game. So we had two injuries. So we had a couple guys out, but came back Wednesday and Thursday and practiced. And on Thursday, we were at practice, and one of our Trey, who was helping run the clock at that point, and he said in the middle of practice, he said NCAA tournament just got canceled. And so when he said that, I thought, well, we're not going to be far behind. And so I guess the next day found out that it was going to be postponed, and we just met with our guys on Friday afternoon and said, hey, it's postponed. We're going to continue to practice. We'll get together on Monday, and kind of went home from there for that week. Still unsure of what's going to happen, but feeling sure that we're going to practice on Monday. So that's kind of how that week unfolded.
They tell you a time when it got delayed the first time. They tell you kind of the timeline of things, or they just say we're stopping it.
They did not. I mean, they were doing the best that they could to try and get that girls tournament finished, and so they really weren't saying a whole lot as far as when it would be or anything like that. They just said, it's postponed, and didn't really give a firm time frame. Anyway, it was up in the air. And then later the next week, they started putting, I think on Tuesday, they came back and kind of put a little bit of a time frame and said maybe the middle of May. But we were coming back, we were coming to practice on Monday, and thought we were going to get together. We were going to get together again, and then our central office folks called and said, well, we're shutting everything down. So there was no practice. And so it's been really weird. We went from a high on that Monday night, and we had a couple practices, but then it's like we haven't seen each other again. And it's really weird to not really have any closure. I'm kind of thankful there's no closure, because that means there's still opportunity to play. But it's been very surreal. You spend 6 days a week with guys a lot of times, and then all of a sudden like that, it's just gone. And so it's been pretty weird.
So how do you, whenever hopefully they pick this tournament up again, and get things going, what kind of concerns do you have as far as conditioning, mental preparedness, going right back into win or go home type situation right off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, really. So now just finding out that we're out an additional 2 weeks, I'm a little bit more concerned in terms of I'm going to be a little bit more proactive in some things that I give them over the next several weeks to be doing to maintain their conditioning. When I thought it was just going to be a couple weeks, I wasn't as concerned, but now I am. But to be honest, I really am not worried about a whole lot. I've said this before, it's not a perfect scenario, but we're just thankful that it's the scenario. We don't care about what the scenario is. We just want to have an opportunity to compete for a state championship. And if that's May 12th, 6th, we don't care when it is. Yeah. We can have one day of practice. I think our guys will do a good job maintaining their health and their fitness and stuff. If we got one day of practice, I don't care. Let's just go play.
Absolutely.
I think what would help you guys also is that everybody's in this boat. It's not just Greeneville High School that's, sitting at home. Everybody's at home, and they all have to deal with it. Does it kind of put, you talked about being on the high after that sub-state win. Does it kind of bring that down when you think about the state tournament? Are you going to be able to get back up for that?
I think they will. I mean, they're chomping at the bit right now. They're following Twitter and following the TSSAA just to see what's going on when. And, if we get to do it, they're going to be ready. There's no doubt in my mind they'll be fired up and they'll be ready to go. And that's not to say that everything will be perfectly smooth, but I got no question as to whether those guys will be ready or not.
Absolutely. Now, I think we might have somebody trying to get in here with us. Nate, we got you.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
We got your picture here, but we don't have any video. I don't know.
I don't know what I'm doing.
He's a little bit technologically. He's not
Nate.
too good on technology.
I thought this was a podcast.
He is our video tech for the entire school system. He runs all, and apparently he can't figure out.
You're going to have to learn Zoom. Come on, Hale.
It asked if I wanted a video, and I said no. I thought it was a podcast.
There you go. You don't have to be on the video if you don't want to. It don't matter.
I don't know how to fix it now. Where's all our players? That's my question.
Yeah.
We don't know. Somebody tried to get on earlier, but all we heard was like the shuffling of paper. We don't know what it was.
Homework.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm just here to watch. Y'all can proceed.
All right.
While you're here, Nate, what's your perspective on kind of the shutdown, on the quarantine shutdown?
In general?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for you guys.
Well, when it first happened, I thought it was a little overkill, I guess. But I've bought into it now. I'm just sitting at the house doing nothing every day. Just eating a lot of food, putting on a lot of pounds. So I'm bought into it.
Kind of sold out to the quarantine.
Do what?
Sold out to the quarantine life.
Oh yeah, I'm all in.
Yeah, we're all in on it.
And it doesn't look like we're working again until August, so
we'll see. We'll see. We've got May.
possibly. I mean, kind of things. You don't have to work, but you can't go nowhere.
Yeah.
Getting those to-do lists checked off.
Oh, yeah.
So, Coach, do you feel like this kind of puts a chip on your all's shoulder, even going forward, even looking past, the tournament, you play it, you don't play it, whatever happens going forward, do you feel like your younger guys, building on to your success this year, you feel like you guys, a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, we want to do this again next year?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, if it doesn't work out, they're going to come back hungry, and I think it'll fuel their fire to want to get back. They believe they can get back. They got to understand it's going to take a whole lot of work, and not just it won't just happen. It's going to take a whole lot of work. Going to take a whole lot of chemistry building. But I definitely think these younger guys, they are hungry, and they want to get down there and play on the big stage and have an opportunity to win a state championship. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that they will, if we don't get to do it, that they're going to be doing everything they can to get ready for next year.
Absolutely.
So if that was your last game, Coach, not saying it is, not saying it isn't, you guys still have that hope of playing in May. But if it is, what do you think is the legacy of this team? What's the legacy of the team going to be for 2019, 2020?
Right. So when I look back at just kind of where we started, I really kind of felt like didn't have disunity, but we didn't have 100% unity. I don't think, in terms of purpose and in terms of relationships, I don't think we were there. And as the year went on, it just things started clicking. Our coaching staff did a great job with some things, and Josh Bennett, he's not on here. He's out selling houses or something, I guess, today. When you're a realtor, you don't have time for this common stuff. When you're a realtor, you got to get out there and make deals. But Josh and Nate, they do so much. I guess we just complement each other well in terms of our personalities, and I felt like it was a really good mix. And our guys, I think probably the thing that gave me the most pleasure is just seeing some guys that probably didn't see eye to eye at the beginning of the year come to love each other at the end of the year. And, we didn't talk about it. I usually talk a whole lot in practice and, just used to talk. And Nate used to tell me I'm talking too much, and one of the things he stood out to me. Yeah. One of the things. Now, have I done a better job of not talking as much this year?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, he used to tell me I talk too much, and I used to try to talk him into doing stuff, and he said you just got to make them, and so that's really what we kind of try and we try to do, and it was really funny that a lot of the things I used to just talk about a lot kind of began to happen naturally. And I think that the guys eventually just bought into the common purpose. And again, it wasn't because of what we said, but it was a lot of it, I think, was the leadership on the team. And we've got 3 seniors, Austin, Lovin, and Micah Banks and Jaden Manuel. And those guys did a tremendous job for us this year of just bringing some team unity. And, that's something. As far as a basketball thing, as far as a basketball legacy, the way they could score was kind of the legacy, was just their ability to score and put the ball in the basket. The last 5 games in the postseason, I was looking at our stats. We were shooting, I think, 56% from the field, and our opponents were shooting 39% in our 5 tournament games. Wow. And so I think that says a lot. That they were not only getting it done on the offensive end, but they were also doing a pretty good job on the defensive end. Now, the one caveat I would say to that is in that Sullivan South game, Sullivan South did shoot about 150 free throws. And so that shooting percentage was probably a little lower because of that. Anyway, their offense was pretty special. And honestly, for another thing for me was I felt like it caused me to grow. It forced me to grow, to have to be different offensively. I've always been very structured in terms of what we try and do, and I really felt like it caused a change in me as well.
Nate, you got anything you want to add? Yeah, got anything to add on the legacy of this team?
A few things on what he said. I think even all year they just kind of had their eyes on the postseason, and so we were beating people, but it was never just completely clicking. And it's almost like as soon as we went to postseason, it's like the switch flipped, and they just started, like he said, playing, not having to do much. And like he said, we changed this year, and instead of having a structured offense, just letting them more transition. And that's how that's how we scored. We looked at it during the middle of the season, how we were scoring most of our points, and most of it was in transition. And so, like I said, I think they just had their eyes on the state tournament the whole year. And so it may become boring to them at one point, and then the postseason started, and it just flipped. I don't know. You agree?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was on both ends of the floor that it kind of flipped. The offense had always been pretty good, but the defense, I felt like we took a step up defensively.
Well, good deal, Coach. Well, guys, we appreciate you all being on here, and good luck. I hope it happens for you guys. Hopefully you guys can make the run and get the ones that you need to get right here at the end.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you all for having us on and for just kind of giving us this opportunity to talk about our guys and our team. And appreciate y'all kind of doing this in our county, just letting people have an opportunity to kind of talk and chat about sports in a medium that for us and probably in our county is not used quite as much. So we appreciate you guys doing that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks
Glad
for
to do it.
Does Coach Ozzie know you stole his practice jersey back there?
It's not stolen.
Is he aware of that?
He's aware. He's
Okay,
aware.
all right.
We'll get him on the pod.
Welcome back inside the coach's office. Matt Ripley, Kyle Donahue, and joining us now is Brian Stayton, voice of the Tusculum University Pioneers, the man, the myth, the legend. Brian, thanks for joining us here today in this quarantine edition.
Yeah, we're all doing our social distancing. It's pretty awesome. Thanks for having me. Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah, so you're a sports fan. We're a sports fan. What's going on, man? How you handling all this right now?
It's tough, really. My wife kind of joked with me and put it on social media the other day that she was, sitting on the couch next to a guy who, on day 2 of the no sports thing, and she's sitting on the couch watching her show with this guy she's sitting next to. Apparently, it's my husband, and it has been weird. It's definitely a change. I'm a guy that's always on the go and used to being on the go, and after they shut everything down, I'm pacing the living rooms. I'm just getting in the car to go somewhere, just come down to work just to see if I can do anything here. So it's definitely been a huge change just for my whole lifestyle, but it's also been something that's been very positive too for me.
Yeah. So you're also the voice of Greeneville basketball. Can you talk about, the shutdown right here? We just talked to Coach Woolsey a little while ago. Can you talk about the shutdown as far as the state tournament?
That's a tough situation just because they're lingering, it's continued to be put on hold. And now that, the governor has said, let's try to, move this thing to April 24th or whatever the date has now been moved back to before we consider going back into school. TSSAA has to take all that into consideration. And to be perfectly honest, they're making the right move. Should they have started the tournament, you can go back and probably reflect, no, they probably should not have. Based on what they did, but there were already so many people already in motion when a lot of things were happening. As far as the Greeneville boys, it's tough because this was a team that was doing things in the postseason that Greeneville basketball has never seen. And I don't know what Coach Woolsey had talked about, but there was no defense to be played. He's a defensive-minded coach, and it's that reference from Major League. Forget about the curveball, Ricky, throwing the heater, right? Forget about defense. We're going to outscore you, and that's all that they were doing at that point. And at that moment, they were setting numbers that were astronomical. When they go to the sub-state game and they're taking on a Fulton team who has eaten their lunch in the last 6 times that they played them, they scored the 5th most points in the history of Greeneville basketball against one of the best defensive-minded coaches at Fulton in the history of Tennessee basketball. Right. When they put up that number. Reed Satterfield's playing on a different level. Jacoby Gillespie, who's getting all kinds of recognition right now, is playing at a different level. The entire team is playing at different levels. They're shooting 62% from the field in the postseason. They weren't going to lose a game, based on the way all of that had been going and the way they had been heading. So it's tough when you look at it from that perspective that they were probably the hottest team in the state, but then there were 7 other teams that were playing pretty good basketball as well that were getting ready to go down there. So the fact that it's postponed, continues to be postponed, realistically, will it ever happen? I'm going to sit here and say no, it won't, but we're still hanging on for some of that hope, I think.
Yeah, now he actually talked about they played some pretty decent defense. I'm just going to throw that out there.
He's wrong. He's wrong.
Just outscoring people. We'll get you guys together. We'll get this video thing together, and then we'll let you guys duke it out. Now, being also with Tusculum University, we had talked about before we started here with the women's tournament being canceled and everything. Talk about how shocked you were when all that started going down and everything that was happening there.
Well, stunned. Number one, absolutely stunned. In 81 years of an NCAA tournament, with all the money that it brings in for all of the schools and all that they do to bring into those cities where they host those tournaments. Now, really the Sweet 16 is really the biggest thing, but that filters down from Division I all the way to Division III, NAI, and the NAI, and how it has that economic impact. For them to make that statement and say, all right, we're just shut down, it's not going to happen. In the sports world, since it's been going on, I don't know that I would have ever imagined that would have happened. I don't think it was going to be a good idea to play in an empty arena, because I think that would have been pointless. However, the revenues from TV would have skyrocketed. I think that would have at least helped in some way. But the issue was that the student athletes were being exposed. I mean, in the NBA, the Major League Baseball, nobody's immune to this thing. So there were people that were going to be sharing locker rooms, and they had to consider all of that. They were going to be in hotels, which wasn't going to be a very good idea. So what they did was a necessary step. And my initial knee-jerk reaction was that this is a decision that is unprecedented, and they couldn't have taken it very lightly. But I think for me then to follow that up, when the South Atlantic Conference with Tusculum announced that they were going to cancel the entire spring season, and then the NCAA made that announcement shortly thereafter, that the basketball tournament and the spring championships were going to be canceled. I thought that was extremely knee-jerk. I thought that was something that, we'll play this out and see how it goes, and to do those things very similar to what the TSSAA is doing, or very similar to what Tennessee State Soccer is doing, and just try to delay this and see if we can't get some semblance of something in and resume where your schedule is when you picked up. You miss all the games that get canceled, but let's pick up somewhere. But now, as I'm looking at this now, that was the best decision, I think, personally, that they could have ever made, because that's a necessary move. We have to flatten this whole thing. We have to flatten the curve. That's the vogue thing to say. Right. We can't let this spread continue to happen. And the way that it's going to happen is to get people in small, confined areas with large amounts of people. And that's what this was ultimately going to do with spring sports and those types of things. Outdoors, it was going to be a little bit more difficult, but you're still getting people together. So that's an unprecedented move. Initial knee-jerk reaction was, that's a little bit overkill. I don't think they need to be doing that. But, in the end, I really believe that they got it right.
Yeah, especially with NBA and all the pro teams, and you can't really justify having students who are not employees being exposed to things when employees are actually not playing. So it's kind of hard to justify it. So that's what we said. Once the NBA started canceling, we knew everything would be canceled. That's pretty unprecedented, like you said, but it's a necessary evil, I guess. So how do you think this affects college sports moving forward into the summer and into next season?
The number one thing that probably everybody's talking about is the economic impact of it, and how it affects everything. That's just a big thing. How does it affect the economy? College sports is huge because, it's a necessary thing for the universities, higher education places, to continue to meet their budgets. This day and age where we're paying coaches astronomical figures, how do you think that they get to those astronomical figures? Ticket prices and everything else that goes there. The NCAA, if you think about what it does for the schools, 2 to 5%, I think is what I read the other day, that just the basketball tournament alone gets to the operating budget of a school. Now, you may not think 2 to 5% is very big, but you're talking about paying an entire training staff with 5% of that income. That entire training staff at that university, their entire yearly wage is paid for based on a TV tournament. Basically, that's what that's for. So the economy, number one, is the biggest thing that it affects, and how it affects other people and the trickle down. The other thing that I hear about is, will these kids in the spring sports get that extra year of eligibility back? I think the biggest holdup there is, if you do that, then you're paying 5 years, 6 years in some cases at universities, scholarships. So if you just take, and just because I read this recently, I think as late as Monday was, Auburn University in-state is $26,000 some dollars, and out-of-state is $48,000 some dollars. And if you're fully funded university like Auburn is, then you provide that funding for a spring sport. Keep in mind, spring sports are not the number one paid sports in a university's curriculum their year. It's football and basketball. Those spring sport athletes who are seniors, we're going to be giving that money back. How do you make that money back the next year based on, then you're paying scholarships to the incoming freshmen that are coming in over 6 years? So I think the economic impact and how it's affected going forward is the biggest thing, just because of the scholarship aspect. How do you make that right? You can't, because that's $26,000 to $48,000 that the university's got to come up with, based on the fact that now they don't have any money to pay their trainers basically this year. So how do they pay those? Those are the two obvious things. But the one thing for me is going forward is the quality of play to me. These people, and I'm not worried about golf and tennis, because you can go out and swing a golf club on your own. That's good enough social distancing. You can do tennis basically on your own from the other side of the court. These are individual sports that create points for a team. I'm talking about baseball and softball and lacrosse. Those are sports where, and you guys have played the sports, you know that it's one thing to simulate a game. It's one thing to scrimmage. It's one thing to go practice every single day. It's another thing to get out in a game. For baseball, you're playing in softball, you're playing up to 10 games a week in softball. And in baseball, it's up to 6-7 games a week. You guys know you can get into a slump in a hurry, and you can get on a heater in a hurry and have a phenomenal year because you had 2 great weeks, and all of a sudden your batting average is over 400. You can't simulate that in scrimmages. You can't simulate that in practice. That is in the heat of the battle, in the heat of the moment. Now these people can't practice. They can't even practice. Yeah. And they go through the fall, and we don't know how long this is going to go. And then all of a sudden we get back to next spring, you're going to see errors. You're going to see a lot of strikeouts. You're going to see a lot of different things that you wouldn't normally see, just because I think it's going to affect the quality of play. Batting average numbers could be way down. Strikeout numbers could be way up. Errors could be way up. I think there's a lot of things that you'll see in those particular team sports that, if this goes on and keeps going on, are they allowed to play more games in the fall to prepare for the spring next year? And how do you adjust that? And how do you do that? So sorry for the long answer, but I just,
no, that's good.
I've thought a lot about how, when I'm going to be sitting there broadcasting next year or whenever it is in the spring, am I going to be sitting there and bored to death because we're going to walk 27 guys a game, or we're going to strike out 30 times a game? Those are the things that I've sat there and actually thought about, because what kind of a rhythm and a groove can people get into? And when you're in lacrosse, you're trying to hit a little target with a little ball, and you sling that thing and maybe it airmails and knocks somebody in the head, whatever. Will the injuries be up? Just different things that I've thought about. I do think that this whole thing affects the quality of play going forward too.
I think, like with baseball, these sports that these seniors probably won't have a senior year to even play, recruiting. I mean, you might have a guy that maybe didn't have a good junior year. His senior year was going to be his chance to shine and maybe get a better scholarship offer, things like that. Maybe somebody, now a smaller school gets that guy and he breaks out, where, the little things like that is how I kind of saw it too with recruiting. Basketball, we talk about canceling the tournament. If you don't play in front of fans, that right there, your runs and your rhythm come off feeding off fans. There's so many things that I don't think people, and like I said, it's one thing to say, let the kids come back and play another year, but my goodness, there's a lot that financially, all the things that play into that. And some of those kids may not want to come back. So, I mean, it's crazy to think that the biggest picture, the biggest impact is so big.
I think that's why the TSSAA is waiting. It's easier in college, because I think kids, they go to college for a purpose. Yeah, you get a scholarship. There's kids that have a dream of playing professionally one day, but only 2% of those kids actually have that dream come true, whatever they're playing. They're going to school for a reason, to start their life. In high school, you're trying to do exactly what you're saying, which is an outstanding point, is you're still trying to impress somebody else to get recruited to come to that school. And you were counting on your senior year to have a big year to make that decision. You may have that offer that's hanging in the balance where you want that, but you might get something better if all of a sudden you improve your batting average, or you improve your goal score, you improve your aces, you improve your per stroke average, whatever it may be, enough to get that really impressive scholarship from that D1 school. And I think a lot of kids do hang out on that. And that's a really good point to bring up. And unfortunately for Division II and Division III schools, they're not going to have the opportunity to bring back their seniors in college, just because of the economic impact, the financial strain. They're not going to be able to do it. We're talking D1 sports. if they get that special kid, it's going to be worth it, to them, obviously, in the end. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So going back to Greeneville, before we wrap it up with one more question. They were on a roll, like you talked about. They were on a roll. What do you think will be the legacy of this Green Devil team? As we talked to Brad, they didn't start out that great, but over the last second half of the season, maybe even just the tournament, they just got on a roll. What do you think is the legacy of that team?
Still to be determined, because they're all sophomores and juniors. They had 3 seniors. They had Austin Lovin, who started coming on. Micah Banks was big time performer from 3-point territory, and Jaden Manuel, who made all tournament team. Those were guys that they wouldn't have been to where they were without those 3 seniors. They weren't big time scorers. Jaden all of a sudden just kind of went crazy. He's shooting 80% in the postseason. From the floor, and I'm talking, he's made 4 3-pointers. He's 4 or 5 from 3. I mean, he's just on a different level right now in his game. And then he's taken that inside, averaging 10 points a game over the last 6. Lovin, had career numbers in the last 3 weeks of the regular season in his scoring. Wasn't always a huge rebounder, but his tenacity defensively is really the thing that kind of set him apart from everybody else. And then Banks, when you go to sleep on him, he's going to burn you with a 3. He's just a fantastic shooter. So those 3 guys will be tremendously missed going forward. But I still think this legacy hasn't been yet defined for this team, with Satterfield as a sophomore, Gillespie as a sophomore, DeBusk as a junior, and a lot of the kids that are going to be coming up. The Ajante Dabbs kid, I think, is going to be special, for them. And how does he affect this team going forward? The legacy of this team, this particular year, was they got off to a really decent start, and then they go to Murfreesboro and the Arby's Classic and lose 4 straight. And all of a sudden they're sitting at 6-4 on the year, and you're questioning whether or not they can get the job done. Then Brad, as he does in January, because his record is always so impressive in January, he wins 80% of his games in January, goes 11-0, and gets to Knox Catholic and just absolutely got trounced. But that was the game that changed the entire complexion of the game. I think the legacy was that we're going to be able to outscore teams. We're going to be able to score more than you're going to be able to score. Plus, we're going to get that one defensive stop that we're going to need in the game down the stretch. Before Knox Catholic, they were shooting 40% in the fourth quarter from the free throw line. They weren't closing games out. They had a 20-point lead, and all of a sudden they win by 4. Here's a team that had 20 wins, and all of a sudden, their scoring margin was a plus 3.7. You're a 20-win team, and you're only a plus 3 in the scoring margin. It says a lot, I think, for where they were, just because they weren't doing a lot of things. But then all of a sudden the Catholic game happens. They get blown out. He doesn't change what he did, but what he brought in was those 3 seniors and kind of said, all right, this is how we're going to take this flight. We're going to get these other guys open. They worked so hard. So I think that legacy was they became he wants to be a defensive guy. I don't know what he's saying. I know exactly what he's saying. We're defensive minded. We're defense, and that leads their offense got their defense going this year after that Knox Catholic game, and that's what was so different about them. And they were scoring, and then teams were coming out of their system and unusually out of their system. I think of the Sullivan South game. They forced a kid to never pass the ball because he thought he was the only option to score, because he felt like they had to score each time down the floor. I think that's what cost them the game. So I think that Knox Catholic game changed a lot in the way that team went forward. You finished the year winning 18 of your last 20 games through the regular season, and then you get into the postseason, and then you are a plus 3 in your scoring margin, and then all of a sudden you're a plus 27. Those things just don't happen very often in a season for the team. And it's unfortunate because I'm sitting here, how do I define the legacy of Greeneville? I've actually thought about that, because I've thought about how do I open my pregame in the Elite 8 with this Greeneville team, and how do I define that? I can't find something that defines this team outside of the fact that they all got together and decided we are going to force another team to become something that they're not. And I think that that's what they were able to do. They imposed their will so much that other teams weren't able to stay within their system.
It's a good explanation. So now, you're sports director. There's no sports. What do you do? What are you focusing on right now? With everything being on hold. That's tough.
Man, I'm doing some podcasts. I'm I'm hanging out there. it's funny that you asked that because I'm also building a house. So it is, we're trying to finish this up. So when this happened, I went to the builder and I said, put me to work, let me do something. So it has been one of the most, and I opened up with this and saying that it's been awesome for me personally because I'm connecting with my kids. During the sports season, I don't get that opportunity. We don't sit down and eat dinner. We don't even do that. And at this time of the year, they're playing soccer, they're running track, they're in cheerleading. And in the summer, they're going to summer camps. We ship them off everywhere. We ship them off to my sisters in Mississippi, down in Atlanta. We don't ever see them. And, of course, my wife who works in the healthcare profession, and it's right now a very scary time for her because she's basically on the front lines. Every evening, we are painting a room somewhere in that house, and then we are going home and sitting down and having a meal. And to me, that's the most awesome thing, to learn what they've done, even though they got up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and went over there and did that. But for me to be able to reconnect with my kids in a way that I haven't been able to do, number one, is awesome. Two, as a sports director, you look for the stories because there's always a story out there. We're still holding on hope that the basketball tournament actually happens, that there is going to be a spring season, that there is. So we're always following that. We're following everything that's going on in the NFL. Tom Brady's stupid, but we're following everything, there.
He's a Bucs fan. So
We're getting this in every episode. Thank you. You got it in.
I knew he was a Bucs. I knew he was a Bucs. I knew that the Winston thing was just going to wear him out too, being an FSU fan too. Every guy. That's about the dumbest thing.
He should have stayed though. Winston should have stayed. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but he would have been a good wide receiver. So you follow a story like that, you follow those things, and really you try to follow this day in history. I didn't realize that on this day in history, 2 days, I guess it was Monday, Marty Story had one of the biggest scoring days in the history of Greeneville basketball in a postseason. So Reed Satterfield shut that down, obviously, with the 42 that he put up. Yeah. But you find little things like that as a sports director that are interesting and how it is affecting everybody else. And it is unfortunate because I think a lot of the spring sports for the kids around here to get out and participate in whatever they're doing. The new thing out now is some of this lacrosse club. I'm heavily involved with the Greeneville Galaxy here and the kids playing soccer. They're not able to do that right now. And how does that affect them as well? So as a sports director, I look at how is this shutdown affecting others and what stories can we find since we're not reporting scores and since we're not going out and broadcasting games. What can we find and see how it is affecting others? And it's basically more news oriented than it's been. So it's a little bit more boring for me. It's a little bit more, interesting, but a guy like Jarrell Neesmith, who is a former Pioneer football player, has just been inducted into the South Flat Conference Hall of Fame, which doesn't happen very often. I had to give him a call and kind of get an interview. So you do different things like that just to kind of get some feedback and some reaction. So you're chasing down different things than you normally would, but still everything revolves around, the national sports and how it trickles down all the way to our local sports.
Good deal. Brian, thanks for being on here, man. We appreciate everything that you do for Greene County athletics. I mean, across the board for everybody. I mean, you're class act, man. We're big fans, and we're just glad to have you on here.
Hey, thanks for asking me, guys. It's awesome. This is great. You guys do a really good job with this thing. Look, I'm impressed with everything that you guys got. It's fabulous.
So if you ever need an interview or something, just let us know. We're available. We're non-essential, so we're not doing anything.
We're ready. I'm not leaving the basement. Get off of there.
I got this whole Zoom thing set up now, man. I may have to start, learning some of this stuff. Man, this is pretty impressive. I'm an old school guy, so this is really impressive. I'm impressed with what you guys are doing here now.
We're ready to go.
You can't really mention the name though, because we're not sponsored. So we'll have to cut that out. All right, thanks, Brian.
Guys, thanks.
He's Matt Ripley. I'm Kyle Donahue. Thanks for tuning in. Next time, for your last one out, turn off the lights, lock up the gate.
This has been a presentation of the Coach's Office, produced by Quotable Productions.